What happens when a beloved prince walks into a television studio expecting respect and walks out after being humiliated on live TV? In just 38 seconds, one question from host Lorraine Kelly would ignite a firestorm that nobody in that studio saw coming. This is the story of the moment Prince Harry got kicked off Lorraine Kelly's show after a heated exchange that left the entire panel speechless and the audience absolutely stunned. The morning started like any other morning on the Lorraine Kelly show. The bright lights of the studio buzzed overhead. Cameras were positioned perfectly. The set looked warm and inviting with its signature orange and yellow tones. The production team rushed around making final checks. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. But nothing about this interview was going to be normal or fine. Prince Harry arrived at the studio early that morning, and he wore a crisp navy suit with a light blue shirt. He looked relaxed. He looked ready. He had done hundreds of interviews before. This was supposed to be a friendly chat, just a simple conversation about his charity work and his latest projects. Nothing controversial, nothing difficult. Or so he thought. The production assistant led him to the green room. She offered him tea. She offered him coffee. She told him they would be ready in about 15 minutes. Harry smiled and thanked her. He seemed calm. He seemed prepared. He had no idea what was about to happen. Meanwhile, in the makeup room, Lorraine Kelly sat in her chair, getting ready for the show. Her makeup artist worked on her face while she scrolled through her phone. Lorraine had been doing this show for years. She was confident. She was comfortable. She knew exactly how to handle any guest. But today, something felt different about her energy. There was an edge to her, a sharpness. But also on the panel that day were 3 other regular guests. There was Martin, the entertainment correspondent, who always had the latest gossip. There was Rachel, the royal expert who had covered the family for 20 years. And there was Tom, the comedian who usually lightened the mood with jokes. They all sat in their usual spots, chatting before the show began. None of them knew they were about to witness television history. The show started exactly on time. The familiar theme music played. The cameras went live. Lorraine smiled her big smile and welcomed everyone watching at home. She ran through the usual morning pleasantries. She talked about the weather. She mentioned a few upcoming segments. Then she introduced her panel. "Good morning, everyone," Lorraine said brightly. "We have a wonderful show for you today. Joining me as always is Martin, Rachel, and Tom. And later, we have a very special guest. Prince Harry will be here to talk about his charity work and some exciting new projects he has coming up." The panel members nodded and smiled. Martin adjusted his tie. Rachel straightened her papers. Tom gave a little wave to the camera. Everything seemed perfectly normal. After a commercial break, it was time for Harry's segment. The production assistant walked him from the green room to the set. As he stepped onto the bright studio floor, the audience applauded. Harry waved and smiled. He shook hands with Lorraine. He greeted the panel members. He sat down in the guest chair. The cameras focused on him. The interview was about to begin. "Prince Harry, welcome to the show," Lorraine said with a smile. "Thank you so much for joining us this morning." "Thank you for having me," Harry replied warmly. "It's great to be here." The first few minutes went smoothly. Lorraine asked Harry about his recent trip to Africa. He talked about the children he had met. He described the schools they were building. He explained how the donations were making a real difference. His face lit up when he talked about the work. You could tell he was passionate about it. The panel members listened intently. Martin nodded along. Rachel took notes. Tom smiled. "That sounds absolutely wonderful," Lorraine said. "It's clear how much this means to you." "It really does," Harry agreed. "These kids deserve every opportunity we can give them." Then Lorraine shifted in her seat. She glanced down at her notes. When she looked back up, there was something different in her expression, something harder. "Now, let's talk about something else," she said. Her tone had changed. It was sharper now, less friendly. "You've been doing a lot of charity work lately. a lot of traveling, a lot of public appearances. Some people are saying you're trying to stay relevant. That you're desperate for attention now that you're not a working royal anymore. What do you say to that? The studio went quiet. The panel members looked uncomfortable. Martin's eyes widened. Rachel shifted in her seat. Tom stopped smiling. Harry's expression changed instantly. The warmth drained from his face. "I'm sorry." "What?" Harry said slowly. His voice was calm, but you could hear the tension underneath. "I think you heard me," Lorraine replied. She leaned forward slightly. "There's been quite a bit of talk about whether all this charity work is genuine or if it's just a way for you to keep yourself in the headlines, to stay important. What's your response to that?" Harry took a breath. He was trying to stay composed. You could see him choosing his words carefully. "Lorraine, I came here today to talk about the children we're helping," he said evenly. "To talk about the schools and the programs we're building. Not to defend my motives to people who clearly don't understand the work we're doing." "Oh, I think people understand perfectly well," Lorraine shot back. Her voice had an edge to it now, a bite. "They understand that you gave up your royal duties. You moved away. You stepped back from everything. And now you're trying to create this new identity for yourself. And some people think it's all a bit calculated, a bit performative. Don't you think that's a fair criticism?" The panel members looked at each other nervously. This was not going the way anyone expected. Rachel cleared her throat like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Tom looked down at the table. Martin's face had gone pale. "A fair criticism?" Harry repeated. His jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Lorraine, I don't think you have any idea what you're talking about. The work we do isn't about me. It's about those kids. It's about making a real difference in their lives. If you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you." "Well, that's quite defensive," Lorraine said, crossing her arms. "I'm just asking the questions that people at home are thinking. Isn't that what journalism is? Asking the tough questions?" "Tough questions?" Harry said, his voice rising slightly. "You're not asking tough questions. You're making accusations. You're suggesting that my charity work is fake, that I'm doing it for attention. That's not journalism. That's just rude." Lorraine laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was dismissive, mocking almost. "Rude?" she said. "I think what's rude is coming on my show and expecting everyone to just praise you without asking any real questions. You're not royalty anymore, Harry. You don't get special treatment here." That was the moment everything changed. Harry's face went red. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. Rachel finally spoke up. "Lorraine, I think maybe we should," Rachel started to say, but Lorraine cut her off with a wave of her hand. No, Rachel. Let's keep going," Lorraine said. She turned back to Harry. "So tell us, Harry, when you wake up in the morning and decide to do another charity appearance, is it because you genuinely care? Or is it because you need people to remember who you are?" "This is unbelievable," Harry said. He shook his head in disbelief. "You invited me here. You said this would be a conversation about the charity work, about the kids. And instead, you're sitting here attacking me, questioning my character, my intentions. Why? What did I do to deserve this? I spent 3 hours on a plane to be here. I cleared my entire schedule. I believed you when you said this would be a respectful interview, but clearly, you had something else in mind from the very beginning." Rachel leaned forward, trying to intervene again. "I think we really need to," she began. "Stay out of this, Rachel," Lorraine snapped, cutting her off again. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Rachel replied, her voice getting firmer. "We're sitting here watching you bully someone on live television. How does that not concern us? We're part of this show too." Lorraine ignored her and turned back to Harry. "Bully? Is that what we're calling tough questions now? You people are so soft. You can't handle any pushback, any challenge. You just want everyone to worship you. You don't deserve anything," Lorraine snapped. Her professional mask had completely fallen away now. That's the point. You think you deserve respect just because of who your family is. But you walked away from that family. You can't have it both ways. You can't leave the royal family and still expect everyone to treat you like a prince. You made your choice. Now, live with the consequences. Don't come on television looking for sympathy or praise. You don't get that anymore. The atmosphere in the studio had become unbearable. Crew members were looking at each other with worried expressions. Some were shaking their heads. Others had their hands over their mouths in shock. This was supposed to be a morning talk show. Light, friendly, positive, but it had turned into something ugly. Something nobody wanted to be a part of. Martin finally found his voice. "Lorraine, this is getting really uncomfortable," he said quietly. "Maybe we should take a break." "We're not taking a break," Lorraine said firmly, not looking at Martin. Her eyes stayed locked on Harry. "I want to hear his answer. Do you think you're special, Harry? Do you think you're better than everyone else?" Harry stood up. The sudden movement made everyone jump slightly. He pulled off his microphone and placed it carefully on the chair. His hands were steady, even though you could tell he was furious inside. That kind of control takes real strength. The kind of strength that comes from years of dealing with difficult situations and difficult people. The kind of strength that meant he wasn't going to lose his composure, no matter how hard Lorraine was pushing him. The studio lights felt hotter suddenly. The air felt thicker. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. This was live television. Millions of people were watching, and nobody knew how this was going to end. "I think I'm someone who came here in good faith," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I thought this was going to be a respectful conversation. But clearly, you had other plans. You wanted to attack me, to tear me down, and I'm not going to sit here and let you do that." "Oh, you're leaving," Lorraine said with fake surprise. "How very mature of you. Running away when things get a little challenging. Is that what you do? Is that why you left England?" Tom stood up too. "Lorraine, stop," he said. His voice was serious now. All the comedy was gone. All the lightness had disappeared. "This isn't right. You're out of line. Way out of line. I've been on this show for 3 years, and I've never seen you treat anyone like this. Not once. What's going on with you? Why are you doing this?" "Excuse me?" Lorraine turned to Tom. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were wide. "I'm out of line. I'm doing my job. I'm asking questions that need to be asked. Questions that the public wants answered. I'm being a real journalist, not just some puppet who reads off a script and smiles." "No, you're bullying him," Rachel said, standing up as well. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This isn't journalism. This is an attack. A personal attack. And it's shameful. Absolutely shameful. I've covered the royal family for 20 years. I've asked tough questions. I've written critical pieces. But I've never done anything like this. This is cruel. This is vindictive. And I won't sit here and be part of it." Martin was still sitting, but he nodded in agreement with Rachel and Tom. "They're right, Lorraine," he added quietly. "This has gone too far." Harry looked at the panel members who had stood up for him. He gave them a small nod of appreciation. Then he looked back at Lorraine. "I feel sorry for you," Harry said quietly. His voice had changed now. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Something like pity. "I really do. Because anyone who needs to treat another person this way, who needs to tear someone down to feel powerful, must be incredibly unhappy inside. Incredibly insecure. Incredibly afraid. I've dealt with bullies my whole life. People who wanted to hurt me because of who I am. People who wanted to make themselves feel bigger by making me feel smaller. And you know what I've learned? The people who do that are always the ones who are suffering the most. So yes, I feel sorry for you. I hope you figure that out. I hope you get help. Because this isn't normal behavior. This isn't healthy behavior. And somewhere deep down, I think you know that. Lorraine's face went even redder. Her hands clenched into fists on the desk. "Don't you dare psychoanalyze me," she hissed. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know my life. You don't know what I've been through. You sit there with your privilege and your money and your famous name, and you think you understand people like me. You think you can judge me? You're nothing but a spoiled rich boy who's never had to work for anything in his entire life." "And you don't know anything about me," Harry replied. His voice was steady, calm. That calmness was somehow more powerful than any shouting could have been. But that didn't stop you from making all those assumptions, did it? That didn't stop you from questioning everything I do. From suggesting that helping children is somehow fake or calculated. From implying that I'm only doing charity work for attention. You made up your mind about me before I even walked in here today. You decided I was the villain in whatever story you wanted to tell. And nothing I said or did was going to change that. You should be ashamed of yourself. You really should. Because what you did today wasn't journalism. It wasn't even entertainment. It was just cruelty. Plain and simple cruelty. And I refuse to be part of it any longer. The studio was completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras. The mechanical whir of the equipment seemed louder than ever in the absence of any human sound. The crew members stood frozen. Some had their mouths hanging open. Some had tears in their eyes. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Nobody knew what to do. This had never happened before. Not in all the years this show had been on the air. Not even close. One of the camera operators was shaking his head slowly, still filming everything. A production assistant had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The stage manager was frantically trying to get instructions from the control room through his headset, but even he seemed unsure of what to do. There was no protocol for this, no plan, no backup. "Get out!" Lorraine said suddenly. Her voice was cold, ice cold, but underneath the coldness, you could hear something else. Something that sounded like panic, like she was realizing, maybe for the first time, what she had just done, what this was going to mean. "Get out of my studio. Right now. I don't want you here. Get out." "Gladly," Harry said. The word came out sharp and clear. He turned to leave, but paused. He looked back at the panel. At Martin, who was still sitting there, looking shell-shocked. At Rachel and Tom, who were standing beside their chairs, their faces filled with concern and anger and something else. Solidarity, maybe. "Martin, Rachel, Tom, thank you for trying to help. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for seeing what was really happening here. I appreciate it more than you know. That took courage. Real courage." They nodded at him. Rachel looked like she might cry. Her eyes were red and watery. She bit her lip, trying to hold back her emotions. Tom looked angry. His jaw was clenched. His fists were tight at his sides. Martin just looked shocked. His face had gone pale. His eyes were distant, like he couldn't quite believe what he had just witnessed, like he was trying to process something that didn't make sense. Harry walked toward the exit. With each step, the tension in the studio seemed to grow thicker, heavier. You could almost feel it pressing down on everyone. The cameras were still rolling. The red recording lights were still on. Everyone was still watching. Every single person in that building. Every single person at home. Millions of eyes, all watching this moment unfold. The cameras tracked Harry's movement across the studio floor. Every step was captured. Every moment was recorded. There was no taking this back. No editing it out. This was happening live. This was real. Lorraine sat in her chair, her arms crossed, her face set in a hard expression. But if you looked closely, you could see her hands were shaking. Just slightly. Just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Her breathing was quick and shallow. Her eyes darted around the studio, not quite landing on anything. She was trying to look confident, trying to look like she was in control, but the cracks were showing. Just before Harry reached the door, Lorraine called out one more time. Her voice was loud, too loud, almost desperate. "This is exactly why people don't take you seriously," she shouted. "You can't handle real questions. You can't handle criticism. You run away the moment things get difficult. You're weak. You're nothing without your title. Nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." The words echoed through the studio. They hung in the air like poison. Every person in that room felt them, felt how wrong they were, how cruel, how unnecessary. This wasn't television anymore. This wasn't entertainment. This was someone having a breakdown on live TV, and everyone could see it. Harry stopped. He didn't turn around right away. He stood there for a moment, his back to the cameras, his hand on the door handle. Then, slowly, he turned around one last time. His face was calm now, controlled, but his eyes were intense, burning with something. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear, every word measured, every word deliberate. "There's a difference between criticism and cruelty, Lorraine," he said. "And right now, everyone watching knows which one this is. What you did today wasn't brave. It wasn't honest journalism. It wasn't asking tough questions. It was just mean. Pointlessly, needlessly mean. And deep down, I think you know that. I think everyone watching knows that. I think even you know that. You can sit there and tell yourself you were just doing your job. You can tell yourself you were being a tough journalist. But we both know the truth. This was personal. This was you trying to hurt someone for no reason other than you could. And that says more about you than it will ever say about me." With that, he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. That quiet sound somehow seemed louder than anything else that had happened. Final. Definitive. The studio remained silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Lorraine sat there, her mouth slightly open, like she wanted to say something else, but couldn't find the words. Like her brain had finally caught up to what her mouth had been doing. Like reality was setting in. The panel members stared at her, not with anger now, with something worse, disappointment, sadness. The crew members stared at her. The cameras stared at her. Even through the lenses, you could feel the judgment, the weight of what had just happened, pressing down on everyone. Finally, one of the producers spoke into Lorraine's earpiece. She blinked, seeming to come back to reality. Back from wherever her mind had gone. She touched her ear, listening to whatever the producer was telling her. But you could see her face change. The defiance was fading, being replaced by something that looked like fear. "We're going to take a commercial break," she said to the camera, her voice shaky, uncertain. "We'll be right back." But even as she said it, everyone knew that things would never be right again. Not after this. Some things once broken can't be fixed. Some words, once said, can't be taken back. As soon as the cameras cut, chaos erupted. The producer rushed onto the set, in his face red with anger, or maybe embarrassment, or both. Rachel stood up without saying a word. She grabbed her bag. She grabbed her notes. She walked off the set. Just walked away. Tom followed her immediately. His footsteps were heavy, angry. Martin sat there for another moment, shaking his head slowly in disbelief. Then he stood up too. He looked at Lorraine one more time, opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then changed his mind and walked away. Within 30 seconds, the entire panel had abandoned her, left her sitting there alone. What just happened? The producer asked Lorraine. His voice was tight, controlled, but barely. What were you thinking? What was going through your head? Do you have any idea what you just did? I was just asking questions, Lorraine said defensively, but her voice lacked conviction. Her hands were shaking slightly. Those weren't questions, the producer said. That was an attack. We're going to have a serious problem here. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside the studio, Harry walked quickly toward the exit. The production assistant who had greeted him earlier ran after him. Sir, I'm so sorry, she said breathlessly. That shouldn't have happened. Nobody knew she was going to do that. Harry stopped and turned to her. His face softened slightly. It's not your fault, he said gently. You were nothing but kind to me. Thank you for that. He continued walking. His shoes clicked against the hard floor, each step taking him further away from that studio, further away from that nightmare. He pushed through the studio doors and stepped out into the cold morning air. It felt refreshing after the suffocating atmosphere inside. Clean. Pure. He took a deep breath. His car was waiting at the curb. His driver opened the door quickly, concern written all over his face. Everything all right, sir? The driver asked. Mauve Harry got into the car and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and looked at his driver. Just take me home, he said quietly. Please. Back in the studio, the commercial break ended. Lorraine tried to continue the show as if nothing had happened. But everyone could see she was rattled. Her smile looked forced. Her voice sounded uncertain. Rachel and Tom had not returned to the panel. Only Martin remained, looking deeply uncomfortable. Welcome back, Lorraine said to the camera. We had a bit of an unexpected moment there, but let's move on to our next segment. But nobody was moving on. In the control room, phones were already ringing. Social media was exploding. People were outraged. They were angry at how Harry had been treated. They were calling for Lorraine to apologize. They were calling for her to be fired. The interview had only lasted about 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes were going to change everything. Martin finally spoke up during the show. Lorraine, I think we need to address what just happened, he said carefully. I think viewers deserve an explanation. Lorraine's face tightened. What needs to be addressed? I asked legitimate questions. If he couldn't handle them, that's his problem, not mine. But that's not what happened, Martin said, his voice getting stronger. You didn't just ask questions. You were hostile from the start. You made accusations. You questioned his character. That's not journalism. That's something else entirely. I don't have to explain myself to you, Lorraine snapped. This is my show. It might not be for much longer, Martin muttered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. The rest of the show was a disaster. Lorraine stumbled through her segments. She kept checking her phone during commercial breaks, seeing the mounting criticism. Her producers were in panic mode. By the end of the hour, it was clear that something had broken, something that might not be fixable. When the show finally ended, Lorraine sat alone on the set for a moment. The crew packed up around her. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody made eye contact. She looked smaller somehow, less powerful. The entitled attitude that had driven her to attack Harry had disappeared, replaced by something that looked a lot like regret. But it was too late. The damage was done. The interview had been broadcast live. Millions of people had watched it happen in real time. And now, everyone was talking about it. Not about Harry's charity work, which is what should have been the focus. Not about the children he was helping, but about how a television host had let her ego and her need to be provocative destroy what should have been a positive, uplifting conversation. That morning, Prince Harry had walked into a television studio, hoping to shine a light on important work. Instead, he found himself the target of an unprovoked attack. And in the end, the person who looked bad wasn't Harry. It wasn't the panel members who had stood up for him. It was Lorraine Kelly, The host who had let her worst instincts take over and had paid the price for it in front of millions of viewers. The 38 seconds it took for Lorraine to ask that first cruel question had set off a chain reaction that nobody in that studio would ever forget.